Right now, I'm challenging myself to see if I can make 128 Regulation H teams that are each different from one another over the course of 128 days. Why 128, you might ask? At the end of the 128 days, we're going to do something special where we battle every team against each other in a single elimination bracket to see which team emerges on top. There will be some competitively strong teams, there will be some gimmick teams, and there will be some probably a good number of goofs and gaffs in there, so if you want to follow through to the end, subscribe so that you can keep up with each day. But without further ado, let's move on to day 101. Alright everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be going over a Kanto team, which is going to start off doing 9 teams in a row, 1 for each region, in order to try and brush up some Pokemon that we haven't gone over yet, or maybe revisit some strategies that we maybe have not used to their fullest potential yet for each region. And of course, if you're going to be visiting Kanto, it's hard to not include talking about Charizard, who did pick up a lot in usage towards the end of Regulation H here as a really strong Pokemon to have in the sun alongside things like Jumpluff. But for our Charizard, we are going to be going with the Choice Scarf set since this team doesn't have any great method of speed control, except we could put like Tailwind on Dragonite or you could put Icy Wind on Dugong, but both of those are not great speed control options. Tailwind's a little bit better because Dugong's super slow. So to get our speed on our Charizard, we are opting for the Choice Scarf item, and we're going to be clicking Heat Wave and Overheat as our 2 big fire type damage moves, because we're going to be Terra Fire to hopefully deal a lot of fire type damage in our Ninetales of Sun. We also have the Air Slash for our flying type damage, and we have the Scorching Sands put on to counter other fire types that we can't hit with our fire type moves because they'll be resisted. But also having a ground type move on Charizard means that we can hit random things like rock types. And of course, the main reason that you run Charizard in Sun is because of its ability Solar Power, which will give us a 1.5 times boost whenever we are in the sun, but also at the cost of losing an eighth of our HP every turn. Next up, we have the Kantonian Ninetales, and Kantonian Ninetales is going to be our Sun Setter, and we're going to be using the Cover Cloak so that we're hopefully not getting flinched, because we're using a pretty offensive moveset here, and the fact that we also have the Heat Wave, but we have the Weather Ball on Ninetales in order to hopefully always be doing the base 100 fire type single target attack into the opponent, which is pretty handy, and also the solar beams that we have a bit of grass type damage on Ninetales to counter things like water types. As well as we have Will-O-Wisp on Ninetales in order to lower the physical power of opponents' moves, because we can afford to burn them. And we are Terra Grass. We've always been Terra Grass. We definitely weren't Terra Fire at the start of this video, so don't go back and look at it. But we're Terra Grass so that we get a boost on our Solar Beam, but also so that we are not being affected by Powder moves, and Grass gives us a lot of good resistances since we were previously Fire. Up next, we're slotting in Venusaur here because Venusaur is just a decent Chlorophyll Mon, as we can get pretty speedy inside the sun, even though we're one of these slower Chlorophyll Mons. As I mentioned, Jumpluff before is the faster one that kind of outpaces Venusaur, but Venusaur still has its own uses, as this Venusaur is more of an offense Venusaur, as of course we have the Sleep Powder just to add a little bit of variance into the game, hopefully in our favor. We can get some sleep turns on the opponent, and we also have the Sludge Bomb, the Energy Ball, and the Earth Power as our coverage moves on the Venusaur, because we want to be Expert Belt, which means that we will be increasing the amount of our super effective damage, which whenever we have a lot of fire type Pokemon, it's really useful to have things like Sludge Bomb, Energy Ball, and Earth Power to hit the Pokemon that we can hit with our fire type moves. And since this is also maybe the last time we're using a Venusaur, it's worth noting that I thought this was the first time we were using Venusaur, but we actually had Venusaur before, so I kind of wish that what I did with this Venusaur is that I made it a Weather Ball Venusaur so that I could get the 100 base power fire type move in Ninetales of Sun, and then also made it a Stellar Terra Venusaur is also something that I think would be pretty fun to have on this team, especially with the Expert Belt, but we're just going Ghost Terra because we're not Covert Cloak on this Venusaur, which means that we don't want the opponent to be faking out into our Venusaur. Up next, we have the pseudo of our region, which is Dragonite, and not every region team will include the region pseudo, but obviously Dragonite is such a flexible Pokemon that it makes a lot of sense to put it on a Kanto team, and this Dragonite is going to be a Dragon Dance setup where we hopefully get off a Dragon Dance or two and then deal a lot of damage with either either our Terra Flying Terra Blast in order to get really strong flying type physical damage into the opponent, or we have the +2 priority extreme speed to hit them, or we just have the Stomping Tantrum just in case we get faked out. Since we are not inner focus, we are multi-scale on this Dragonite, which means that we can be faked out, or just if there's any other kind of things that would inhibit Dragonite from moving, then we can go for the Stomping Tantrum with the 150 base power. And we are also Lumberry on Dragonite just because we want to avoid things like Will-O-Wisp burns or Spore Sleeps. We can dodge it one time with our Lumberry. Up next we got Dugong, and the main reason that I put Dugong on this team is because it is in fact a Kanto team, and we're never going to get to use Dugong other than this moment right here, right now, because I need a fake out Pokemon hopefully for either whenever we cannot afford to have Sun, but we want to use Charizard's offense, but there's another Pokemon that's faster than Charizard, even though we're Twist Scarf. We can click fake out into them, or we can give Dragonite another setup turn for its Dragon Dance, and not a lot of people know that Dugong has fake out, but all these teams are at least somewhat designed to be open team sheet, so obviously your opponent will see that you have fake out. And then we also have the Ice Shard on Dugong just for some physical ice type damage into the opponent, mostly to get focus sashes from things that were previously surviving on 1 HP, or to hit things like dragons that's kind of difficult to hit with our fire or grass type moves. Then we also have the Flip Turn on Dugong, which allows us to get a little bit of pivoting in with Dugong, as Dugong's a pretty tanky mon, so we can use it as a slow pivot in order to bring in our Sun maybe a turn later than we want to in case the opponent has Weather. And usually you don't want to run an Ice type Pokemon on a Sun based team, however our Dugong is a Water type, which helps negate the weakness to other Sun teams that we would be going up against, and we have the Thick Fat ability, which will further give us another resistance to fire, so Dugong can afford to slide itself onto the Sun team pretty nicely, I would say. And we also have the Leftovers just to give Dugong a little longevity over time and restore some health. And we're Terra Grass on Dugong mostly just because we want to avoid powder moves. And last but not least on the team, we are slotting on Hitmonchan because I wanted another fake out Pokemon to help out with the previously aforementioned setup or damage dealing. And Hitmonchan is just a nice Pokemon to have because it is an inner focus mon, which means that we can not be intimidated and we can also not be flinched back ourselves, so we can get off some good fighting type damage with our close combat that will really pressure things like Incineroar. And we also have Knockoff to get rid of the opponent's items, and we have a really fast taunt in order to taunt into Pokemon that do not want to be taunted because they want to go for status moves. And with Hitmonchan's Focus Sash, which never really feels like it comes up, but it is kind of handy to have, we can at least get off one hit with Hitmonchan always. And we're Terra Stealing Hitmonchan because we want to be resisting things like Fairy type moves and Psychic type moves. But yeah, that's the basic gist of the team. Let's get into some battles. Alright, so first up we have a battle against an opposing weather team where they have Pelipper or Calamar Rain, but they also maybe have Whimsicott for a good amount of Tailwind support for their Ursaluna, since they have Ursaluna and Kingambit, but they don't seem to have any form of Trick Room for those two, so they might actually be a little bit faster. But they lead Incineroar and Ursaluna here, and we lead Venusaur and Dragonite. I'm not terribly afraid of the Ursaluna right now because it's not burned on the first turn, and they do get the Intimidate down to Dragonite. And we try Energy Balling Ursaluna, but it's just not quite enough to take out Ursaluna. They do use Incineroar to close combat into Dragonite, which seems like a bit of a strange idea. I mean, they do break the multi-scale, which is the main purpose of what they were doing there, but I'm not sure. Other than Incineroar clicking Flare Blitz into Venusaur there, which would have caused Incineroar to take a lot of damage themselves, and then we can swap out into another Pokemon. There's not really much difference the Incineroar could have done, because it could have faked out into Dragonite, but then Venusaur gets like even more free damage. And if they faked out into Venusaur, then they're kind of risking the Covert Cloak there. But here we went for Extreme Speed into Incineroar because I did not want Kingambit Sucker Punching into Dragonite, and we don't know what slot they Sucker Punched into because we went for a status move and a faster move than them there. And we see Pelipper is their last Pokemon, so we bring in Ninetales so that we can keep the weather control always, and we Energy Ball it to take out Pelipper, and unfortunately because we're in Sun, the Hurricane does miss Venusaur on the coin flip there. They Sucker Punch into Venusaur, but that's not quite enough to take out Venusaur, as Venusaur's got a little bit of tank to it, and we get the Will-O-Wisp into Kingambit here, and the opponent doesn't even decide to Sucker Punch on the next turn, because we just get the Energy Ball and Weather Ball into Kingambit. Here we got a lot of Dark-type Pokemon, which we do have Hitmonchan, but Hitmonchan kind of struggles to hit some of these Pokemon because it's not faster than most of them, especially with Murkrow setting up their speed control for them. But the opponent starts Hydreigon and Murkrow, and we start Dugong and Hitmonchan here because I wanted to try and fake out Hydreigon, or at least maybe we could pressure the Murkrow, and if it's not Covert Cloak. Usually the Murkrow is Covert Cloak, but we tried to fake out the Hydreigon and then close combat into it to take it out, but the opponent makes the correct read here, which is to protect Hydreigon and then go for the Tailwind with Murkrow, but it also means their Hydreigon isn't choice spec, so I'm not terribly afraid of it, as both of these Pokemon have a good bit of special bulk to them. We try Ice Sharding the Murkrow just in case the Murkrow was Sash, but they swapped into Incineroar, expecting to get an Intimidate, but they cannot intimidate our Inner Focus Hitmonchan, and our close combat is going to take Hydreigon there. But now Meowscarada comes onto the field, and I was pretty okay just protecting with Dugong and getting Ninetales on the field in order to try and pressure Meowscarada, because if we get rid of Meowscarada, they don't have any pressure for our Hitmonchan left, was my idea. We get the Ice Shard into Murkrow here, just in case Meowscarada was the Sash as well. Also a possibility as Incineroar gets the parting shot into Dugong, but now they're in a pretty difficult spot where they can't really KO Ninetales as Murkrow resets their Tailwind. They are going to Flower Trick Dugong, and Dugong is going to not take that critical hit very well at all. But the Heat Wave is going to double KO both of the opponent's Pokemon, and the opponent forfeits since we have 3 Pokemon left and a fighting type, and they have an Incineroar. And lastly, we have a battle against a pretty interesting team here. It looks like they're trying to go for Skill Swap Milotic, with maybe also using Gothitelle just to trap in the opponent after going for Trick Room with Indeedee, maybe Fast Ape, and Bastiodon is also here. So I wanted to predict them leading Milotic and the Weirdeer here, but they lead Annihilape and Milotic, so it's a little bit different. And just in case they were Scarf Ape, I went for the Energy Ball into Annihilape in order to lower its health. But we get the special defense drop on the Energy Ball, but that gives them their Defiant, which if they decided to go for close combat here, it would have been not great for us. They just went for U-turn into Venusaur, which isn't too much of an issue. We Solar Beamed with Ninetales there, but unfortunately Milotic protects, and Indeedee decides to redirect, and it redirects the Sleep Powder into itself because it is safety goggles, but Weather Ball does a big chunk of damage into Indeedee, which I don't think matters because Milotic is just coiling right now as we Sludge Bomb the Indeedee, and we get another crit, which also probably did not matter, but we're starting to chip the Milotic with our grass type damage, and Milotic only has the Muddy Water to throw at us, which in Sun isn't too big of a deal. Milotic decides to protect again, and I predict this by going for the Sleep into the Annihilape, and actually I guess I didn't predict it because I just Solar Beamed into Milotic. I thought I went for Heat Wave on that turn, but we Energy Ball the Milotic and we do a lot of damage there with our Expert Belt, and we swapped out Ninetales on this turn so that I could swap it in on the next turn because our Sun was about to wear off. But Venusaur gets an accuracy drop, and I really do not like them accuracy drops, so we just have Charizard go for the Heat Wave, and that's going to take out Annihilape, and of course Muddy Water is going to be super effective into both our Pokemon, but with the Sun up we are not very much under threat, and the opponent just decides to forfeit there. We don't get to see their last Mon, but whatever their last Mon was probably wasn't taking the Heat Wave from Solar Powered Charizard too well. So yeah, that was the Kanto offense team, and obviously Charizard was doing really well at the end of Regulation H, as I mentioned before, and these are like okay pieces to pair up with Charizard, but the definitely strength of this team is the fact that we have 2 fake out users that not a lot of people expect to be fake out users, and maybe have their own little niche different roles as different types of fake out users, because if you're using Fake Out, you're normally expecting something like Incineroar or Rillaboom, but you ain't expecting a Dugong, and Dugong's ability to pivot out with the flip turn might be a little bit more unexpected, so it can help you out in a couple of matches. Especially against other Sun teams that have like Jumpluffs, for example, as I mentioned before, Dugong can just click Ice Shard into Jumpluff, and Jumpluff either has to decide to Terastallize or to like take a half of its health off. So maybe in a way this is actually more of an anti-Sun team. I should have made that the title of the video. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, maybe consider leaving a like on the video, and even consider subscribing because both of those things help me out an absolute ton, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.